Hi, I'm Delaney Rustin, physician and the filmmaker of the 4 Screenagers movies, and this is the Screenagers podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode because we're diving into something that is absolutely crucial: sleep. Specifically, how we can protect it, given the sleep deprivation epidemic we're currently facing. And yes, I'm using the word epidemic intentionally because that's exactly what it is. Since right around 2012, with the explosion of smartphones, tablets, video gaming, and lots of other online things, the number of teens reporting less than 7 hours of sleep per night has been climbing steadily. The most recent data from a nationally representative survey monitoring the future of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders shows that 51% of teens are getting less than 7 hours of sleep most nights, far below the 8 to 10 hours they really need. Today, I'll be sharing some clips from the Screenagers film that just released, which is called Screenagers, Elementary School Age Edition. And I'm going to be sharing some clips from it today to highlight new scientific data that relates to sleep and, in fact, our children's brains. And I'll also be talking with Dr. Judith Owens about something I'm deeply concerned about: the increased use of melatonin for kids without sleeping problems, to sleep. And I just want to say that while we're going to be talking some about melatonin, I want to say off the bat, the big issue for me is that parents and kids are being marketed the idea that you need to consume something, a product, to sleep, which is really setting the stage for a dependence that makes me really concerned. And this isn't covered in the film, Melatonin, but it's a critical issue and I really want to address it today. And finally, we'll explore practical ways to help kids get good sleep. So let's start with the science. Here's a clip from the latest film, and it's of Lauren Hale, who's a longtime researcher of sleep. She's at Stony Brook University. She's the founding editor-in-chief of the Sleep Health Journal. And here she discusses research led by Z. Wang at the University of Maryland and his group.
Researchers followed 9 and 10-year-olds, and at baseline, they collected data from the kids, from the parents, and analyzed brain scans. And then they followed up with them 2 years later. The kids who were insufficient sleepers, compared to the kids who were sufficient sleepers, had changes in their brain development, especially in areas like the basal ganglia and the temporal lobe. And this corresponded with worse mental health outcomes, worse behavioral outcomes, and measurements of intelligence were lower. This is concerning that insufficient sleep among kids may have lasting consequences on brain development and possibly into adulthood.
Letting our kids know about this research, I think, is incredibly important. We can talk to kids in schools about it. I mean, there are significant changes that researchers pick up that correspond to real-life issues when kids are experiencing deficiencies in sleep. Kids do pay attention when we talk about brain health. Sometimes it can feel like we over-talk about the brain, but this is, important research, and we hadn't been seeing many studies that relate sleep and brain health of young kids. This gets me to the next point, which has to do with devices in the bedroom. Lauren Hale led a team of researchers in doing a meta-analysis of studies that looked at the impact of devices, TVs, tablets, phones, in bedrooms of young people, and how did that impact their sleep. And I'm talking about both duration and quality of sleep. They put all these studies together. They found the best studies to include in the meta-analysis. And what they found is really important. Here's Lauren Hale in the new film talking about this.
My team and I analyzed numerous studies in which we included youth age 6 to 17, and we showed that just having a mobile device, which includes a phone, a tablet, in the bedroom, even if they didn't use it, was associated with almost a 2-fold risk of insufficient sleep duration.
So that's a 2-fold increase. We're talking 100% increase. That's significant. And so how does having devices impact sleep if they're not being used? Well, there's hypotheses about all different ways, and I'm sure a lot of these come into play, as well as ones I'm not going to even mention. But one of it is just the sheer work of having to resist the temptation of a device, obsessive thoughts pulling at the young person to want to be on the device that keeps them from going smoothly into sleep. In the same way, the device can be triggering thoughts about issues that are transpiring online, whether that's online cruelty, some sort of social conflict, some feelings of envy. I mean, the list goes on and on. And another issue that I have seen talking with young people in my clinic is that having devices in the bedroom can disrupt that early morning sleep time. Just kind of waking up and knowing the device is there, it starts to call at the person. So rather than falling back asleep, they might go to get it and even take it out of the room and start using it. But there's a way that it can disrupt that early morning, half asleep, half awake state. So those are some ideas. But the bottom line, it's just more reasons that sleep is saved when devices are out of the bedroom for sleep time. And let me add that I'm a big proponent of having screens out of the bedroom all day and the night. But today we're talking particularly about issues around sleep. And here now I want to turn to melatonin and my conversation with, I'll let her speak for herself.
Professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School. I see children ranging from newborns to college age. I've been involved in doing research in sleep in children and adolescents for at least 25 years.
Judy, let's talk about this tsunami of melatonin being marketed to parents of young kids. It hit me when I was in the dentist chair reading a magazine about 4 years ago. I know it was good housekeeping because I kept the magazine. I asked the dentist, of course, can I keep this? Because I opened it up and there was a 2-page spread of a little girl in her bed. She looked maybe 3 or 4, with the words about back to school and natural sleep. And there were these butterflies and this lovely little bottle of melatonin. It was all about this idea that naturally sleeping requires taking a gummy bear to sleep. And I was just floored. And then I asked my daughter, who was babysitting a lot of the time, did she see this phenomenon, parents giving melatonin? Because in my clinic with teens, this just didn't come up. I'm a big proponent of using behavioral strategies. And she said, yeah, Mom, about 3 out of 4 families that she was babysitting for had a routine of just nightly giving gummies with melatonin to their kids.
I am truly amazed at the number of families that come in to see me in sleep clinic whose children have sleep problems. The percent who have either been on melatonin or are currently on melatonin is virtually 100% at this point. And these are even very young children, 2-year-olds, for example. And many times the melatonin has been recommended by their pediatrician, or the family has gone to the pharmacy and saw the nice little bottles of pediatric melatonin, or their friend's child had sleep problems and recommended it. It's just so available and it's so widespread. I would say, particularly in the last 5 years, but even in the last 10 years, there's been, in my experience, a dramatic increase. And that's borne out by a recent study through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that showed an over 500% increase in the amount of accidental ingestions. So Poison Control Center reports of a child accidentally taking melatonin.
Tell me more about this.
So what this recent study did was they looked at a 10-year period of calls to poison control centers, that a child had taken too much melatonin or had taken melatonin when it wasn't recommended, somehow had gotten into the melatonin. I mean, gummies can be very helpful in some instances because kids will actually take the medication, but on the other hand, it's candy to them. So a lot of times these were gummy ingestions. And parents were alarmed enough to call a poison control center and report it. And there was a over 500% increase in the number of those calls across the United States to these poison control centers, which is very alarming. And I think really underscores how common the use of melatonin in the pediatric population.
You know, the rest of the world, you need a prescription, right, for melatonin, but in the US, you don't need one.
You do not need a prescription for melatonin in the United States, and it's really one of the few countries in the world in which melatonin is available in any strength without a prescription. Melatonin is not well regulated by the FDA because it's over the counter in the United States. And so there was one very interesting study that was published out of Canada a few years ago that looked at a wide range of preparations of melatonin that were labeled as being 5 milligrams. And they actually analyzed with a specific chemical test how much melatonin these preparations actually contained. It ranged from 0 milligrams to 20 milligrams. And in addition to that, about a quarter of the samples they tested had serotonin in it. Serotonin is what we call a precursor of melatonin. So serotonin is metabolized into melatonin. Now, we don't know what the effects are, but there are concerns, certainly, that there's also this other substance in these melatonin preparations. And it not only varied among different brands, but lot to lot within a certain brand. So I will oftentimes have patients who come in and say, well, I took melatonin and it was working great, and then it just stopped working. So we don't know whether that could be related to the fact that they tried a different brand or they just got a new bottle of melatonin.
Let's talk a little bit more about melatonin and the biology, like the impact of it on youth biology. What do we know and what do we not know?
We know that melatonin actually has an effect on reproductive hormones. So in other words, hormones that increase around the time of puberty. And so the evidence is a bit mixed right now, and there aren't a lot of studies suggesting that there may be some impact on pubertal development of melatonin. Melatonin in humans could potentially have two different effects. It could delay the onset or the beginning of puberty development because it has these suppressing effects on reproductive hormones. Or alternatively, if you stop melatonin use in a pre-pubertal child, in other words, a young child that hasn't yet gone through puberty, you could actually trigger them into early puberty.
Do we see that with animal models?
Yes. We have data in animal models that suggest that melatonin has these effects. We don't have that evidence yet in humans, but I think given how common the use of melatonin is in young kids, that's something that we really need to monitor. There has been one study that looked very short term on the effects of melatonin in children with autism and measured their reproductive hormones as well as some other chemicals in the body and brain, and did not find any effect in the short term. But again, the long term, meaning years worth of use of melatonin, we just don't know.
Okay, so let's turn to the main topic I really wanted to talk about is marketing melatonin as this new natural way of helping kids sleep. And we're not talking about kids with sleep problems even. It's just this idea of everyone should take, a tablet or a gummy to go to bed.
I'm really very disheartened by this trend of advertising, marketing melatonin as a natural substance for even very young children. And it's almost become, I actually call it vitamin M, because it's now being promoted as a way to get your child to sleep better, peaceful, restful sleep. So you don't even have to have a sleep problem to take it. It's like a Flintstone vitamin. So that's very disturbing.
What I'm just so concerned about is this conditioning that young people, kids and parents are being sold this bill of goods, like, oh, just give them this tablet to fall asleep, this gummy. And I would just bet a lot of money that we're going to see such a major uptick in people coming into my clinic, teens and older adults, wanting Restoril, Ambien, harder drugs, medicines for sleep, because their brain is so programmed to think that they need something.
I think the message that kids get from their parents or caregivers is oftentimes you need a pill to help you sleep. And that is a very dangerous message, a slippery slope when you're 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years old. And I've had patients who ask for their sleep pill at bedtime every night. They've become so, not necessarily physically dependent, but psychologically dependent. And there have been a few studies that look back on older adolescents or young adults who are on melatonin. And many of them have been on melatonin for years and years.
Okay, and what about my thought about, this is going to escalate and people are going to want trazodone, Ambien, all sorts of medicines as adults because they were conditioned as kids for sleep?
Well, I think we don't know, because there are no prospective, forward-looking studies. I think there's definitely a very real concern that message that you need something, you need a pill, you need a gummy, whatever, in order for you to fall asleep, could definitely persist and eventually lead to perhaps dependence or feeling like you need something stronger and maybe a prescription medication for sleep. That's certainly a possibility and a very significant concern for those of us who are seeing this trend towards an increased use of melatonin in children.
So what do we do as parents? First and foremost, sharing with them the science of sleep. And I've written in my blog a lot more science about sleep, so take a look at that. Definitely working to have devices out of the bedroom is important. And I want to talk about this more concretely because people often talk about having a charging station. And when I was filming the first Screenagers film, right away, there was a family where the young boy, he was about 11, was found to be going into the charging station living room in the middle of the night and sneaking the tablet into his bed and playing video games. And I just felt for this guy. Like, I totally got it. Like, this is a super fun game and you don't see any downsides. It's a game, for gosh sake. So, why not sneak it? It's the temptation that's actually not really fair to young people. And when Tessa got a smartphone, it was clear from the get-go that it was going to make sense to have it charging in our bedroom at night, not in the hallway, but in our bedroom. And then, she'd give it to us or we'd have discussions or whatnot. But now and then she'd say, hey, I need to check my phone or I forgot to tell someone something. And that was okay. It was just a dialogue. It wasn't like you can't see it at all afterwards. I want to share a final clip from the new Screenagers film, Elementary School Age Edition. And this is two parents talking about this issue, about what they do with their kids' devices. They're two moms, and each of them have their child with them. One of them has a boy with them, one has a girl, and the kids are about 8 or 9. And you're going to hear the two parents talking right now.
Problem we've had lately is he keeps sneaking his Chromebook from school, and we'll find it in his bedroom. He'll sneak it like at nighttime or early in the morning, and so we're trying to solve that issue. And sometimes it's also the switch, because the charger base for the switch is down there.
But we lock up our iPads, and so when they're not in use, they're in a locked briefcase. And that started a couple years ago because it was hard with the sneaking and stuff, so that's just how it is. We just lock them up.
I like this idea of the locking briefcase.
You see these moms with their kids, and they're talking about the kids sneaking in front of the kids, and the kids really don't even bat an eye. At that age, they're not feeling outed or shamed or anything like that. And you see them actually holding the hand of the parent, or one starts like getting cuddly with the mom. I mean, it's a really loving scene to me, because the parents are struggling, but they want to do the right thing, and they want to take the temptation away. And these kids are not bad for sneaking, not at all. The pull is so great. We want to just get them in the habit of not having that at all. It's just fully put away. If you have a teenager and they have been in the habit of sleeping with devices in their bedroom, it's a tricky thing to change course. But I want to speak a little bit about that. I think it's important to still have discussions about sleep time. Share this science to them as they're going to be thinking in their lives about what they're going to do, and at any moment they could change. If you sleep with the device in your bedroom, you can say to them, hey, I've decided I'm going to experiment for 2 weeks or 1 week with device out of my bedroom. What if we did this as a family? Is a great way. You can even give an incentive. You could say, look, I've messed up. I didn't realize that. I know you're in the habit now of having your phone with you in your bedroom, but it would be so worth it to me, because I keep learning about all this data, that you not do that for a couple weeks. And if you do that, maybe there's some sort of reward that you give them. I'm not at all above that. It does not have to be some fantasy intrinsic idea that they're just going to suddenly want to make this change. I've worked with a lot of teens, however, who have changed, and they realized how much better sleep they were getting, and they stayed with it. So keep that in mind. Final big point is Lauren Hale is holding up, you guess what it is, in this final clip from the film.
One reason kids give for needing their device in a bedroom is they want it as an alarm clock. This works just fine.
That's right. She's holding up an analog clock. So I can't recommend that enough, having an alarm clock for our kids. Let's get back now to melatonin and the idea of becoming dependent on something to fall asleep. So as you know now, having listened to this, I'm really concerned definitely about the biological impact of melatonin, the risk of not even getting what you think that you're getting, the impact on puberty, all these unknowns, but this idea of creating a intrinsic subconscious belief that a pill is needed to fall asleep. And in the same way, young people definitely can develop a dependency, a reliance on electronically mediated activities to fall asleep. And parents ask this to me all the time. If you have a young person who, for example, falls asleep with music, ideally you could use a Bluetooth type of a situation that could pipe in music into their room, could be helpful. But the key is not having electronics that they are in control of, that they might end up using through the night or be tempted to, or have those issues that we've been talking about. Really trying more soothing things, helping them to learn how to self-soothe, self-relax at bedtime, whether that's read a book, which sometimes that can be really activating for young people, so you have to see. Sometimes parents will have the kid read a book that they've already read or listen on tape to a book that they've already read. Of course, there's journaling, there's writing a story, there's doodling, there's other ways that we want to help young people to fall asleep. And I will be talking more about all sorts of other techniques and strategies and science in future podcast episodes. That's it. We covered a lot today, and I'm going to end here. And I'm just incredibly appreciative of Lauren Hale and Judith Owens and the parents that you heard from today. Thanks for listening today. And please follow the Screenagers podcast, which is the same thing as subscribing. And rate and review it if you have a minute. This really helps spread the word. We have show notes at screenagersmovie.com, where you can also learn about our Screenagers movies, sign up for my weekly blog about parenting, and search topics of hundreds of past blogs. Meanwhile, we'd love to hear your ideas for future podcast episodes. Email me at delaney@screenagersmovie.com. This Screenagers podcast episode was produced by me, your host, Delaney Rustin, Lisa Tabb, Rebecca Tolan, and our sound editor was Alan Gofinski.